it is said that when an elder dies, this is a saying among many Africans, when an elder dies in Africa, a library is burned down. Why people say that is because these elders have lived an experience. It is important that we make out that experience and keep it for generations to come. How do you think this one is going to be in 500 years from now? But the question is this one. If we don't prepare for 500 years from now, in a twinkle of an eye, it will be there. Of course, all of us will be dead and gone. Our flesh have decayed and all of that. But we need to plan for that. We plan for that for the sake of all of us. Not for the sake of me or for the sake of you as an individual, but for the sake of all of us. Because all of us are bigger and stronger and more effective than any singular one of us. So storytelling is an opportunity to register our presence and to help also others to do that.
As a social architect, I do get gigs to go to companies and talk to their staff about team bondings and stuff. What I easily do is that I try to start up telling a story with what they could connect with, right? Maybe talking about a brand they like. I know many people like Gucci and Versace, and I talk about how this thing appeals to them. And slowly, I bring the story back home, how it affects us as individuals and how we could better work on ourselves. And in this case, the organization.
All right, at the center of our project, for example, A-classes, is that we'll have a tour project that we intend to do in Nigeria sometime in the future. We want to build a research center for storytelling because we believe that storytelling is important for us so that we can explore even the concept of oral narration. Now, why we want to do that is we want to make sure that we collect story. We basically go and harvest story from the living legends among our people. You see, it is said that when an elder dies, this is a saying among many Africans, when an elder dies in Africa, a library is burned down. Why people say that is because these elders have lived an experience. It is important that we make out that experience and keep it for generations to come. That is what we intend to do with that project. We don't know if we are going to be able to get the fund to be able to do that, but we intend to do that. And we're already doing it in our little ways. For example, this Sunday, I'm going to be presenting a biography about my eldest brother. Actually, it's the first time that I'm looking at my family in this way, and I'm already emotional of how I'm going to present that book. Now, one person who read the book told me how much he loved it because I was making reference to how, for example, in about 500 years from now, people are going to take up that book and read. Which means I'm not even thinking of now. I'm thinking of 500 years from now. Who is going to read that book? Now, how do you think this one is going to be in 500 years from now? But the question is this one. If we don't prepare for 500 years from now, in a twinkle of an eye, it will be there. Of course, all of us will be dead and gone. Our flesh have decayed and all of that. But we need to plan for that. We plan for that for the sake of all of us. Not for the sake of me or for the sake of you as an individual, but for the sake of all of us. Because all of us are bigger and stronger and more effective than any singular one of us. So we tell the story not for the good of, or not because of any individual, but for the collective, for all of us. That is why we are telling the story. Now, I can imagine, for example, me going to Nigeria or going to Ghana or Uganda or Congo or in any other place in Africa. And of course, in the diaspora, why not? Because that is what I've been doing here. Just literally taking my little device and going to meet people. Hey, tell me your story. Then I put it together and make a book out of it. I see the value for that. That is why I'm doing this. I know that there is a value for it. That before this elderly person pass on, he leaves his memory for those that will be here after him. It is an obligation, it's a responsibility that we must do. Now, if I could see somebody that did that for my father, I would be very happy. My father died, I was in primary 2, which means I never really have the chance to be able to grow up. I had a father that I finished my school, I passed, I take any position, I would say, oh, daddy, this is what I've gotten from my exam. So I could ask him a lot of questions. I never had that privilege. So if somebody have recorded a tape, I don't even say my father should have said something very intelligent, beautiful, even if it was stupidity, but I want to hear him talk. If somebody have written something about my father, I will appreciate it. I will pay anything for it to have it. But it never happened. So storytelling is an opportunity to register our presence and to help also others to do that. All right, before I pass the mic to Olatuji, there is another person in the room, which is Emi Egwemi, okay? Maybe I pronounce it. I'm not very good at pronouncing names. All right, it's your turn, brother. Please share with us.
Yeah, you did justice to the name, Emi Egwemi. Yeah, I just want to drop my 2 cents on what Dr. Mashi has said about going back to our roots, which is very, very important. I remember when I was pretty young, I asked my mom, why were there so much corruption and dishonest people? She didn't really give me an answer, but at the time she told me that while she was growing up, they used to have a marketplace whereby people would just come, put their goods there, and just put stones to signify the prices. This is in Africa. And people will come, just see the commodity, see the amount of stones, and just put the money there. So it shows the level of honesty that the people had at the time. Now, as we know, life has evolved and there's corruption and everything. But it's that statement alone that my mom said created a mental picture in my head how organized people were. And that's storytelling on its own. So basically talking about the nostalgia, overcoming nostalgia of storytelling, I feel borrowing from the word of Mashi, going back to our roots is very, very important. But the truth is, you don't need to be 100% unique in terms of telling your stories, but that is why doing research about a certain story is very important. Let's say, for example, as you're hosting this space, if like 90% of people who are attending this space are Gen Zs, you will look for a better way to tell your story, right? Because you want to curate it in a way that will make meaning to them, that they could relate to easily, and that they could create a good impression. I'll come from the movie angle. So, for example, when you create a team before production, that's pre-production, you have your script writer, you have the man on camera, you have the producer, the director, the cut and everything. But there's also one part in terms of storytelling that is very, very important and integral, which is the sound. Let's say, for example, Black Panther. It talks about the story of Africa and how rich Africa is in terms of minerals and everything. That's one angle. You also talk about the hierarchy of kingship, patriarchy, and everything, where if you look at it in another way too, it's also a part of African culture. But there's one thing I really find amazing, which are the songs they use in terms of telling the stories. I know one of the songs they use that my mom used to sing to me when she was telling us Tales by Moonlight. And that really, really resonates with me.
Hello and thank you for checking out this video. I'm Obehi Ewanfoh, the host of the African Diaspora Storytelling Series. Every 2 weeks we meet up on LinkedIn to talk about different ways we can leverage the power of storytelling as people of African descent. Now this is it. We are uniting the millions of Africans in the diaspora through the power of our story. It does sound like what you are interested in. Make sure to subscribe to this channel and share this video with your friends who might need it. Now back to today's conversation.
So the impact of storytelling, there's a lot of element that brings this feeling that we resonate with. It could be the songs, it could be different aspects that brings this story to life. Let's say, for example, if I'm talking to a different audience, which I normally do, as a social architect, I do get gigs to go to companies and talk to their staff about team bondings and stuff. What I easily do is that I try to start up telling a story with what they could connect with, right? Maybe talking about a brand they like. I know many people like Gucci and Versace, and I talk about how this thing appeals to them. And slowly, I bring the story back home, how it affects us as individuals and how we could better work on ourselves. And in this case, the organization. So I feel it's very, very important. The truth be told, we cannot be 100% unique in telling our stories, but depending on the audience we're talking to, we can have that impact if we're able to twist the story. Like I said earlier, if we're here and everybody here is, let's say, millennials or Gen Zs, there's a certain way you're going to curate how you're going to host this space, right? Because okay, this is my audience, and this is how I'm going to tell the story or curate this room. So it is very important that we also know how to twist our story. So going back to the past, maybe for example, I want to write a story about something that happened way back in Africa that my parents told me, and I want to tell the audience of now. There's a certain way I want to do it so that it will appeal well to the audience. What I'm just saying is that in terms of our storytelling, we need to be very apt in terms of research. That's borrowing from the word of Marcia. We need to be very apt in terms of research, and that will help us telling our stories as Africans.
Thank you so much for that, Emmy. That is powerful. I love that. I really love that. I want to take away the word there, which is adaptability. In that when we have a story, even though if it's the same story, and when we tell it to the audience, we need to know who the audience is. we spend a lot of time. There is another room that we have where we talk about storytelling tips on storytelling series. It's part of this series because we have 3 rooms about storytelling on LinkedIn. In that room, we talk about different tips about storytelling. Then we have talked about audience a lot because you need to know who your audience is that you are telling story to. And like I was saying before, I don't know if you were here there, Emmy, making reference to my book in 2015, in that when you pick up a story, the same story, you could actually tell it to different people, but each time you could tell it differently because you are supposed to be organic. You are supposed to adapt the story to the situation and the event under which you are telling the story. In that, what do you want the person to do? Because you are basically trying to trigger a reaction from the people. Or do you want to make the people feel good? Do you want to make them reflect? Do you want to make them forgive something because somebody have maybe by mistakenly wrong another person, so they are trying to look for reconciliation, they are trying to make peace? Is that why you are telling the story? Because if that is why you are telling the story, even though the story you are going to use might be the story of war, you are not necessarily going to lay emphasis on how to maybe attack enemy. You might lay emphasis on maybe the after, how to make peace, because as human beings, we cannot always be fighting. Sometimes we fight, sometimes we also make peace. So if you want to tell that story in the military camp, maybe your country is being attacked, you can be laying emphasis on how to make peace. That is not the right time to talk about that because they have just killed a lot of people in your country. You want to strategize the military on going out to capture the enemy. So you cannot be talking of a reconciliation at that time. Your story will lay emphasis on how to capture the enemy. That is going to be the important thing because it's the same story. It's just how do you adapt the story to suit the current situation under which you are telling the story, the context. Now, this can be very, very vital. If maybe, for example, you are using your storytelling for business, because you are going to understand if you make mistake, you are going to lose the sales. Therefore, you are going to be very careful how you tell your story. Know who you are telling the story to and know what you want out from that story. If you know that and you follow the step towards that, you will get result. If you throw out, just begin to talk, just talk, you will lose. So it is very important that we know who we are telling the story to and why we are telling the story. What are the senses and sensibilities of the people? That is fundamental.